so when I got to go on President Truman's tour, again, just being very persistent and asking for that opportunity. The American Negro press, I thought they would be all over it because a Black journalist had never gone on a presidential tour.
This was to the
And
West
they
Coast?
told me
This was
I
to the
was,
West Coast.
yes, they told me I was on my own. And so I borrowed $500 from a bank. I was a member of Sigma Gamma Rho. They took up a collection and they bought me a blouse. I used some of my own money, but I was often criticized for how shoddy I looked, that I was not a sharp dresser. I did not have the right accoutrements and the gloves and everything. And I said, I'm a working woman, and where in the world am I supposed to get all this extra money? You have to understand, again, Washington, D.C. was a Jim Crow town. So while I had earned the right to walk into the White House press corps, what I could not do was eat around the White House. Most of the diners around there did not let us eat there. I was still restricted as to what kind of transportation I could use, where I could live. So getting into the White House press corps was actually a blessing for me because they also had free food. So at least in covering the White House, I did not have to stuff my bag with whatever I could from home because there was literally not an establishment anywhere around that I could, just duck my head into and get something to eat. So I lived, even as I was making history, I lived with constant financial insecurity. I broke history while worrying about rent. In Washington, D.C., I struggled to find housing. Landlords refused me. Hotels denied me. Segregation dictated where I could sleep. As a matter of fact, while I was on the president's tour with President Truman, at one point, the police harassed me and threatened to throw me off the tour because I did not belong there. The president eventually apologized to me. He stepped in. Now, something else happened on that tour. It was very important to me to ask the questions that no one else was going to ask and to be the representative of my race. And one evening, long after the other press, they'd ask their questions and the things they were interested in, there was a Black man, while President Truman was clad actually in his pajamas and his house coat, who asked a question about civil rights. And the president responded. And I made that the lead for my story. I always tried to find, whatever the story was, to find a way to make it of interest, to tie it in to the issues affecting my community. There were times when I lived in temporary rooms, relying on friends, boarding houses, unsafe accommodations. Think about the irony of walking into the White House,
But yet you don't have a roof over your head.
but not a decent apartment.
Mm.
So in 1947, I became the Washington bureau chief for the Associated Negro Press. Like I said, serving over 112 weekly papers. I became the first Black woman accredited to the White House. I became the first Black woman with congressional and Supreme Court press credentials. Now, don't get that wrong. Credentials did not mean acceptance, but it did mean I was in the room. And so, even within that press corps, I was one of 3 Black reporters as we continue to grow, and one of only 2 women, and of course, the only Black woman when we went on that president tour with President Truman.
Okay.
Now, not all presidents treated me the same way.